NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play. What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring you the latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, we got a bit to talk about in this episode, so let's dive right in. The season is officially underway, and the Nets are 2-2. I mean, when I take a step back and I see why they're 2-2, I'm kind of like, all right, I understand it. But I'm not happy at all about it. I mean, I expected them to be no worse than 3-1 the first 4 games, and I really expect them to be 4-0. Instead, they're 2-2. And, you know, obviously it makes a little bit of sense when you look about how they got that way. Like I said, especially with the Grizzlies game when the Nets rested both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And obviously the injury to Dinwiddie, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this episode. You know, so it makes sense, but at the same time, the 2 losses the Nets had were very winnable games, and I kind of think they should have won both those games. Sort of. Once again, we'll talk about that as we go game by game. So let's start off, though, with the first 2 games of the regular season. The opener against the Warriors, and then the Christmas Day game against the Celtics. Things could not have gotten better if you were the Nets, those 2 games. They come out on national TV, both games, and just announce their presence to the world. Like, here we are, here's KD, here's Kyrie, here's LeVert coming off the bench, here's Jared Allen coming off the bench. We got firepower, we got energy, we got excitement. And they just destroy the Warriors on national TV. Just absolutely destroy them. And, you know, the Warriors, what can I say? I mean, they're an injured team. They lack depth. They're a young team, whatever. But the Nets did what they're supposed to do. That is what you're supposed to do when you play teams that aren't as good as you. You're supposed to crush them. And that's what the Nets did. They crushed the Warriors, winning by 30 points. It was just incredible. Durant looked amazing. Kyrie looked amazing. LeVert coming off the bench looked amazing. Everyone looked amazing except for Taurean Prince and Spencer Dinwiddie, which I complained about in the preseason games. Said those 2 guys look useless. And I'm just like, whatever. You know, you can't have everyone play well. Then they follow that up with the Christmas Day game against the Celtics, in which they looked amazing in that too. I mean, it took them a while to get going. Like, they were only up by, I think, 4 in the first half. And, you know, it just kind of seemed like the team was going through the motions a little bit. But then all of a sudden, like, a switch flicked for both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And they both just turned it on in the second half. Next thing you know, the Celtics are down by 20 going into, like, the fourth quarter. You're just like, when did this happen? And we all know the Celtics are supposed to be one of the teams that are supposed to compete in the Eastern Conference. And, yeah, look, we know that Kemba Walker didn't play in that game. Because he was hurt. But this was the second time the Nets played the Celtics in like a week. Obviously, the first game was preseason. But like you would think that maybe the Celtics would have figured something out. And they kind of did. Like I said, they were in it in the first half. But they just had no answer later on. And it was just a great win. A great Christmas Day win. Same exact thing as the first game. You know, Dinwiddie and Prince were the only 2 real negatives in my eyes. Though DeAndre Jordan was getting under my nerves a little bit too, but we're going to talk about that a little later too. But, yeah, and the Nets won. And so everyone is thinking now the Nets are one of the best teams in basketball, like I thought. They're 2-0. They're winning on an average of like 25 points a game. You know, Kyrie looks good. Durant looks good. LeVert looks good coming off the bench. Everything looks good. Then they play the Hornets. Now, look. This Hornets team is better than they've been in the last couple of years. I think they're a playoff team this season. You know, the acquisition of Gordon Hayward for them is huge. I know Terry Rozier looks like he's going to take his game to the next level. You know, Graham, like they're a good, solid team. But you should not be losing to them if you have both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I'm sorry, Nets. I'm sorry. Like, that was inexcusable. And it wasn't just that they lost to them. It's just how they lost. It just looks like that sometimes with Durant and Kyrie, and this is meant to be no knock on them, and a lot of superstars do this, they kind of just coast until they have to crank it up. If you remember, the Nets were down by 16 in that game and then came back to go back and forth and have a chance to win down the stretch. But, like, that just shouldn't happen. When you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, that just shouldn't happen. But the whole team just kind of seemed like they were coasting. And give credit to the Hornets. They were making shots. Everyone was making shots. Terry Rozier had a monster dunk on Kevin Durant. I mean, they played really, really well. And the one thing that kept on frustrating me was watching DeAndre Jordan just getting out-hustled and out-rebounded by Bismack Biyombo. Bismack Biyombo! I mean, look, Bismack Biyombo is not a terrible player. He's an adequate big in this league. But DeAndre Jordan should not be getting beaten on the glasses by Biyombo. I'm sorry. And it's just like, And the Nets got out-rebounded in that game. They out-hustled. It just was a disaster. And yet somehow they had a chance to tie the game or take the lead down the stretch. A nice play by Pick and Pop with Durant and Kyrie. I really wanted Durant to shoot that three. He decided he was going to pump fake and get to his spot and shoot a mid-range jump shot for the tie. And it just went in and out. I mean, you couldn't come any closer of a miss if you tried. And the Nets couldn't capitalize, and they ended up losing. And, you know, it was just very frustrating to see. And then, obviously, the other frustrating part was the injury to Spencer Dinwiddie, which happened in the third quarter of that game. Now, listen. We all know that I've been, at least last episode, been talking about how Dinwiddie hasn't looked good the first few games, and because he just seems like he's out of place. And I do believe that. But by no means am I going to sit here right now and say the fact that Dinwiddie is hurt and going to be out for most likely the whole season with a partial torn ACL, by no means is this a good thing for the Nets. You know, I know that I was saying, I would trade him, blah, blah, this. This isn't good. He's still a talented player. He's still a player who could have figured it out, and maybe if he figured it out, played a huge part in the success of this team. So there's a very bad injury for the Nets. Like I said, they expect him to be out the whole season. He's going to have surgery next week. Luckily, it is a partial tear, not a full tear, so the recovery process is a little bit quicker. But once you have surgery, you still have to wait for the body to fully heal. So he's most likely going to be out for the rest of the year. And it's just like, damn, man, the Nets can't catch a break. But Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot just looked fantastic in Dinwiddie's absence. And I like Luwawu-Cabarrot, and I think that was a good choice by Steve Nash to be the guy to replace Dinwiddie in the rotation. So Dinwiddie goes down. They lose that tough game to the Hornets. I'm mad. I'm like, this is not what I wanted. And then they go and play the Grizzlies on a back-to-back. Right off the bat, we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were going to be rested for load management and not play in the second half of the back-to-back. It was the most predictable thing in the world. And, you know, going into the Grizzlies game, I'm just like, the Grizzlies are going to beat the Nets. I don't see how the Nets, without Spencer Dinwiddie because of his hurt knee, and KD and Kyrie, I don't see how this Nets team can win unless they just play great as a collective unit. Well, the Nets did put up a good fight in that game. And, you know, when John Morant got hurt as well, for the Grizzlies, I'm thinking, once again, not that you ever wish an injury on anyone, but it's like, hey, maybe now the Nets have a chance. But Kyle Anderson had a career game, and once again, every single big seems to out-rebound and outplay DeAndre Jordan. And I'm just watching this, and I'm watching DeAndre. Look, DeAndre Jordan had 4 blocks, 9 rebounds. Okay, yeah, he's good. 4 blocks is good, this and that. But the Nets got out-rebounded 56-50, and they also got beat in points in the paint 56-46. What's the point of DeAndre Jordan other than to get rebounds and play good interior defense? That's why the Nets have him, to be a physical interior presence and get rebounds. Yet, you didn't win the rebound battle, same thing. Didn't win the rebound battle, and you didn't win the points in the paint battle. Even though you still scored 46 points, you just gave up 56 more. And your starting center, who's played 30 minutes, including all of overtime, just was terrible. I'm sorry. I didn't think he played well in that game. Meanwhile, Jared Allen, the guy who I've been for the longest time saying needs to start on this team, had 15 rebounds in 22 minutes and played much better interior defense. Yes, Valanciunas had his way a little bit with Jared Allen at times, but overall, Jared Allen played so much better than DeAndre Jordan. yet DeAndre Jordan gets 30 minutes and plays all of overtime. I mean, I'm sorry. I understand that you want to appeal to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and DeAndre Jordan is the veteran, and he's friends with those guys. But if that's really the reason why he's starting, I have a big problem with it. If you remember way back, I talked about how my problem with the Steve Nash hire wasn't the fact that Steve Nash wasn't qualified. It was the fact that it wasn't Sean Marks hiring Steve Nash. It was Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving hiring Steve Nash. And this is the same thing. It's not Steve Nash now starting DeAndre Jordan over Jarrett Allen, who has clearly been the more superior of the two. It's KD and Kyrie wanting DeAndre Jordan to start over Jarrett Allen. And I don't like it. That's my problem with what I'm seeing. And then it's one thing to start, but to leave DeAndre Jordan in overtime. And he had 4 turnovers. And look, he didn't play like terrible. I'm making it sound worse than he actually played. But if you watch the game, you just knew that Jarrett Allen was playing better. And that the Nets just looked better with Jarrett Allen. And the fact that the Nets didn't go with Jarrett Allen down the stretch, to me, frustrated me. And like I said, what's the point of DeAndre Jordan if he's not going to play good physical defense and get a lot of rebounds? Like, I'm sorry. It's frustrating. And DeAndre Jordan serves his purpose. I still think DeAndre Jordan should be coming off the bench. Switch those. Let Allen play 30 minutes and DeAndre Jordan play 18. Right? Like, why can't we have that? It was just very frustrating to watch. And LeVert taking a step back 3 when the game is tied as the last shot. I mean, go to the basket or do a mid-range jump shot. LeVert, your game is not a step back 3. So that was a terrible play. And then once they went to overtime, I knew it was over because no Nets could make a damn shot in overtime. And, of course, Nets lose, Grizzlies win, and it's just a very frustrating situation. And once again, I just don't think the Nets should have even lost that game because if Steve Nash put Jarrett Allen in more, especially in overtime, I think the Nets might have won that game. I really do. I'm not trying to say that was the only reason why the Nets lost in that game because, let's be honest, most of the main guys did not play well except for, well, actually, no, none of the main guys really played that well. It was the 2 guys who got opportunities, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot and Chris Chiozza, who surprised me because apparently he's the one who got the 2-way contract and the Nets released it, Jeremiah Martin. I didn't know that, but when I saw Chiozza come in, I'm like, I thought the Nets waived him. And then I did some research, and it turned out they waived Jeremiah Martin to give Chiozza the 2-way contract, which I love because remember, I love Chris Chiozza. Chris Chiozza looked great, and Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot looked great, but no one else looked good. And Taurean Prince, I don't know what's wrong with this guy. As much as I want to blame DeAndre Jordan, when I take a step back and I think about the game again, Taurean Prince is just garbage. He was like a minus 14, plus minus. Like, he made like 2 shots and took like tons of dumb shots. He's just bad. I've said this before in previous NetsBoy episodes. I'm not a big Taurean Prince fan because he's the definition of inconsistency. He'll play great one night and score like 18 points and be like 5 of 7 shooting, and then he'll do what he did against the Grizzlies and go like 2 for 9 and just be complete trash. And I hate inconsistent all-or-nothing players like that. I hate it. And he got a chance, too. He was the starter in this game. So getting really sick of Taurean Prince, getting really sick of, DeAndre Jordan starting over Jarrett Allen. And we're only 4 games in. So I don't know. I mean, the way I look at it, the Nets should be 4-1, at least 3-1. Instead, they're 2-2, whatever. Season's still young. A lot of teams that are supposed to be good have been losing. I mean, the Lakers lost 2 games. The Bucks have lost 2 games. The Nuggets, I think, have only won 1 game so far. The Celtics have only won 1 game. Like, it's still early on. Like, you can't get too wrapped up in the beginning of the season. I've always said you got to wait until at least around the 15 to 20 game mark to really get an understanding of who's actually good and who's actually bad in the NBA. So it's too early to really figure anything out. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself too much. It's just frustrating because it's just not what I expected at this point. So, all right. So that was my rant about the first 4 games, and now we got to get ready for the next couple games. So, moving forward, the Nets have a back-to-back, well, not a back-to-back, technically. It's a home-and-home against the same team, which I don't think I've ever seen that before. That must be a COVID type of situation. Like, they're like, they got to play twice. Instead of having them fly, back to Atlanta, let's just have them play in Barclays Center twice back-to-back. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really seen that. But anyway, the Nets play the Hawks Wednesday night, and then they play them again on Friday night, both home in the same team. So, look, the Hawks have looked great this year so far. Trae Young looks like he's becoming everything we expected him to be. The players that they have with Gallinari and Bogdanovich and Capella and the youth of that team, they're a dangerous team. The Nets should still win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they shock you and the Nets actually lose one of those games. And then they got the Wizards, who have still seem to figuring it out with the new backcourt of Beal and Russell Westbrook. I feel like the Nets should win that. And then they have the Jazz. As we know, the Jazz are one of the better teams in the Western Conference. At least they were last year. But I still think the Nets should win that game. So you look at the next 4 games, Hawks, Wizards, Jazz. Let's take another 3-1 stab. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Could be 2-2 because, like I said, the Hawks are a scary team. But at the end of the day, like, I just got to keep on reminding myself that the Nets are the better team out of all those 4. Like, they really are. They're the better of the teams. And, like, it's just really hard for me to sometimes wrap my mind around the Nets being the favorite in these games since it's, like, hasn't happened in years. So I'm going to hold out for a 3-1 next 4 games. But 2-2 could certainly be possible. And I'll be frustrated to go 2-2 the next 4 games. I mean, they're already 2-2, and a 4-4 record just doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like a 5-3 record feels a lot better than a 4-4 record. It just does. So but we'll see what happens. Hopefully, Durant and Kyrie continue to play the way they played. Hopefully, LeVert kind of gets back into the flow of things because he didn't look that great in the Grizzlies game, even though it was all really him. And we'll see what else, Steve Nash decides to do with the rotation. Is Luwawu-Cabarrot going to be the guy that sticks in the rotation for Dinwiddie? Or is it going to be Chiozza? Who knows? Is he going to start LeVert in the starting lineup regularly now that, Dinwiddie's out and with KD and Kyrie? Or is he going to leave him come off the bench? We have to wait and see. I will leave LeVert on the bench and start Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot with KD and Kyrie. I just think that LeVert is better off the bench. And we'll also see if Steve Nash can just say to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, listen, I know he's your boy, but we're better when Jared Allen gets more minutes. Simple as that. Because that is the truth. And at some point, Steve Nash is going to have that conversation because it's a pretty popular opinion among a lot of people who I've spoken to that they all agree with me that Jared Allen has played better than DeAndre Gordon. But we already talked about that. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about the Nets 2-2 start, what you feel about everything I just talked about, so on and so forth, and what you expect this Nets team to do the next couple games. So keep your eyes open to the next NetsBoy episode. And until then, this is NetsBoy signing off.